I was the only artist in my family, but they all were very supportive of me doing that.
Wow, only artists in your family. So do you have like a point back in your timeline where you were like, I know this is, I can't do anything else. Like, this is my passion and that's it.
That happened really late in the game when I was getting ready to apply to colleges. Originally, I was thinking of going to a school for forestry. And then at the last minute...
Oh, really?
Yeah. At the last minute, my father came home from work and said he had a friend that he worked with whose daughter got accepted to Cooper Union in New York City, which was one of the best art schools. And at the time, it was tuition free. So if you got accepted, there was no tuition. So he liked that idea a lot. So he said, have you ever thought about applying to art school? And I said, no, but let's give it a try. And I completely gave up the idea of forestry and applied to Cooper Union and 2 other art schools and did not get accepted to Cooper Union and wound up going to the Rhode Island School of Design, which turned out to be a fairly expensive school. So that whole plan just kind of backfired.
It didn't work.
No.
So from the start, though, you knew, did you feel like pressure to have some sort of monetary gain from your art because of that?
Sure. When I majored in illustration while I was there, and when I graduated, I had absolutely no idea how to make a living. Now schools do a better job of that, kind of giving you tools to leave school and kind of hit the ground running. But at the time, they didn't do that. So, there was a lot of pressure on me. And what I did, I was living in New York City with a couple of friends, and for the first 6 or 7 months, couldn't get anything going. I was living on savings and started to run out of money. So I thought, well, I've got to get a job. What am I going to do? So I wanted to get a job somehow with an art component to it. And I managed to go to work for an agent in New York City that they were agents for commercial illustrators. And so I went to work for them in their office, and I was their one and only sales representative. So I wasn't doing any artwork for them at the time. That came later. But in the beginning, I was the person who would take portfolios from the artists that we represented and visit and make presentations to art directors and creative directors at all of the advertising agencies and book publishers and magazines, and which was
to sort of lobby for these artists.
I was so exactly, yeah, and I was incredibly shy in the beginning, but having done that, it really gave me a sort of trial by fire, of meeting people and thinking on my feet and negotiating and doing all those things that really helped me later on when I started working on my own.
Right. Because one of the things I feel like artists struggle with most is trying to advocate for themselves and, get what they deserve for their time and their energy. And I feel like that's a huge struggle. So having that leg up, I'm sure, came in handy and made you feel more confident about selling your own artwork and, making those
Absolutely.
Contracts available to yourself.
Yeah. It was.
This would have been
so education.
Is this like the early 80s? This when we're talking that you were doing this?
I started with them in 1985 is when I started.
Okay. Yeah. And how long did you work that position before you were able to branch out on your own.
I was with them for 10 years or so, and it worked out really well because they, like I said, I wasn't doing any illustration in the beginning, but slowly started to, mainly because they had an artist that they represented who was Spanish. He lived in Barcelona, and he was also a fine artist, and so he really didn't enjoy doing commercial illustration that much, but did it now and then, and he was their highest paid illustrator in the group. And when he would turn down work, there was no one else that they represented who was able to sort of fill that gap. So his work was similar to mine in a lot of ways. So I started building a portfolio that could work as a substitute for him when he turned down illustration jobs. And little by little, that started to happen. So that's how my illustration career took off. I was doing both. I was working for them during the day and then painting at night. And I got so busy that they eventually said, you just stay home and do your illustration work, and we'll represent you as an illustrator, and we'll hire somebody else to work in the office. So eventually I was just represented by them as an illustrator, and was able to just do that full time.
Was that a great relief, or did that come like with its own like new level, new devil type of pressures?
It was kind of ironic because it was great to be able to work on my own, but ironically, the whole time I really wanted to be a painter, a fine artist, rather than an illustrator. So the fact that my illustration career took off was sort of bittersweet in a way.
It was not the door you were expecting to open, but it was the door that was open for you to walk through at the
time. Right. Yeah, but I was happy to do it because it was really exciting and a lot of fun.
So during this time period is when you would have done like the Celestial Seasonings pieces and the pieces for Sony, which included the piece or a couple different pieces, right, for Journey, and you've done different album covers. But it seems like during that you were able to maintain a fine art style. Like, I mean, these are not like like the pieces that you did are I mean, how do I put it? I guess when I think of illustration, sometimes I think of less time put in, and I know that doesn't make any sense from an artist's point of view, but it's like it seems like you were still, there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into these pieces that were going, for illustrative purposes.
Yeah, it was really my intention to do and sort of attract the sort of commercial illustration work that fit as closely to what I was doing in my spare time, trying to build a painting portfolio. So that did work really well. Eventually, the illustration work that I did looked very close and very similar to the work I was doing for myself as a painter, before I found galleries to work with and sell my work that way.
Now, had you always had this love of surrealism, right? Am I using the right term with that? The right artistic term?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah. I, even as a little kid, the idea of just drawing or painting something by looking at it and just recreating that faithfully, that was never as much fun as working more surrealistically, which means creating something that looks realistic and believable, but would never actually exist in reality.
Sort of like the more fantastical or fantasy art, right? That was had your. I mean, because you're a huge Salvador Dali fan,
right? Yep.
And he also uses a lot of. Well, I mean, I guess besides
a huge influence, and all of the surrealist artists out there too have. Say that again.
Yeah. Sorry, we got a little glitchy there for a second. We're holding on to that. We're gonna get through this. Right. So with the style of surrealism, I mean, it doesn't necessarily not include more modern features, but you have chosen not. Like every once in a while, there's something mechanical in there. Like there'll be, like some roller skates or some timepieces or different items in there that are a little bit more modern-esque, symbolism in there. But for the most part, other than the features of the humans, you remain in the landscape of nature. You stay in that world. Is that something that you realize you kind of had to like put a ruler on yourself and decide not to include? Like I can't think of. Correct me if I'm wrong. You would know. But do you ever have like a piece that has like like an automobile or something in there, like an older, like those features are not included in there?
Usually not. And I don't intentionally limit myself to the subjects that I do, and you're right, it's mostly sort of figures in landscapes with animal elements or bird references or that sort of thing. That's just the subject matter that feels the most right to me. I think you mentioned in the beginning the idea of psychological landscapes, and that's a term I use a lot when I'm talking about my work, because the way I see my paintings is that these figures they're not out in the world, they're internal figures existing sort of within themselves. So everything that's around them is some reflection of who they are or what they might be going through. But having said that, if the painting sort of tells me that it needs something mechanical or something modern in it, I listen to that and I'll put it in if it feels right. There's one that I did a couple of years ago called The Redwood, and it's a woman who's half redwood tree and half woman, and at the bottom you see a window.
Is that the one with the collar?
And, some campers. No, that one goes back a lot further, but no, this one was about 2 or 3 years ago. It's more recent.
So it does have some campers and some actual vehicles in there. I haven't seen that one yet. I'll have to go through and look. Yeah,
so and just to tell you a little bit about the way that I work, well, first of all, going back to when I was an illustrator, as an illustrator, you need to show the client a pencil drawing of what they're going to get eventually, to sort of put them at ease and put their minds at rest so that they know exactly what they're buying, basically.
They're like, what is he doing? He's just over there working. We don't know.
Yeah, they don't let you just do whatever you want to do. Although sometimes that happens. Actually, that happened with the Journey cover that I did. They did literally say, just do whatever you want to do. So that was like a dream job. So when I first started painting, after my work as an illustrator ended, I would begin every painting by doing the same thing. I'd work it all out. I would know exactly what the composition was going to look like. But slowly over time, I just started trusting my intuition more. And so today, I'll start a painting and it will just be the main element. And I literally won't know what the finished painting is going to look like when it's done. I'll just jump in, and as I'm working on it, ideas will come to me, and I'll sort of edit them. They may wind up in the painting, they may not. So that makes it a lot more exciting as you're working on a painting. A little scary too. But
how is it going to reveal itself?
I really enjoy working that. Yeah.
So what you mean by the main element, though, do you, like, I'm thinking back to, to like the little bit of art school that I have taken, and it's like, okay, you start with your sort of fill in your background color or something like that. But you're saying you might perhaps start with like, the figure of the woman that's going to have like the fishtail or the conch shell or something, and then fill in the elements around that main figure.
Yeah.
Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, that's exactly right. You can kind of see this painting in the background that I'm working on now, which is a woman in a nautilus shell. And that was the beginning of the painting. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see very well, but right now she's sort of on a hilltop looking over the sea or the ocean. And all of that is painted in, but I know there's going to be more to it, but I just have to sort of wait and listen and let my subconscious sort of suggest things to me.
So when you started, like the piece behind you, for example, does your work come from like dreams or emotional experiences, or a variety of different, like you were feeling that this character needed to be brought, into this realm?
Never. I don't think I've ever painted a dream. The way paintings usually start is by me seeing something, usually a photograph, maybe in a magazine, or maybe another painting that sort of sparks an idea. And this is one thing I got a lot in my studying of Salvador Dali, is that, and I've talked a little bit about it already, but trusting my subconscious. I'll start with that one main image, and I think I might have forgotten your exact question, but I really trust my subconscious to sort of give me inspiration, because I'm a real strong believer in the idea, and Carl Jung talks a lot about this too, the idea that your subconscious is really where all your creativity is, and it's kind of a scary place for a lot of people. It's there's a lot of darkness there, that sort of thing. But if you work with that and are open to it, there's so much richness there that you can sort of draw on to be creative.
Yeah, and I agree with you with the darkness of it, but also, I mean, the inspirational side of it. I mean, I know that from being a singer songwriter myself, that you kind of have to go into that landscape in order to reap the benefit, get the fruit and everything out of that world. But it can be scary. And it's also, I mean, not just to go there mentally with yourself and emotionally, but also the idea that you're going to trust it and hope that it, something comes of it that is useful, I guess, or a quote unquote successful project, which is always that word is very tricky as an artist. Do you consider yourself a successful artist?
Yeah, successful in as far as being lucky enough to do it full time and make a living just doing this. But going back to what you just said about trusting your subconscious, and this is something I had to learn. There were times when I would be inspired to do some really dark paintings that you might assume would have, the public wouldn't be interested in. They were either too personal or too dark or that sort of thing. But I went ahead and did them anyway. And not every time, but very often, they sell immediately, and I'm shocked that someone feels drawn enough to these really dark images to actually want to own them and hang them on their wall and live with them. So that took a while to trust that. But so when I'm starting a painting and I feel a real resonance with the idea, I try not to shy away from it if it's something that is scary or depressing, or and again, that's very rich material that everybody can really relate to in some way or other. So I try not to edit those out.
Did you, so you said you've gotten, I mean, obviously as everybody grows and changes, you get, hopefully better at not only your craft, but like you said, tuning into your subconscious. So does that mean that like in the past, did you scrap a lot of paintings or scrap a lot of projects?
Yeah, there's probably a bunch that were just seemed too weird at the time.
And you being a Dali fan too.
Right. Well, he had a lot of courage, that's for sure. But he was trying to shock people, so I'm not trying to shock anybody. But yeah, there's a bunch that I can think of that I never did. Although I had a show years ago called the Black Paintings, and there was a period in my life of probably 5 or 6 years where all kinds of stuff was going on, not in a good way. And looking back on those years, I realized that what I was doing was sort of sucking the color out of my paintings little by little. The more depressed I got, the less I wanted to make paintings that were bright and cheery and colorful. So it got to a point where almost every single painting was almost black and white. And I didn't realize this was going on. But interestingly, at the same time, when I went back and looked year to year and counted how many paintings I was doing each year, I was actually at my most productive when I was most down and things were the darkest. That was a real surprise.
There's a lot of questions I want to ask you out of that. Do you think that it's a necessity for an artist to have those dark periods in order to be productive? Or does that just come, part and parcel with being a human, you think? But it seems like almost all artists feel like the darkness helps. I mean, I felt like that too. Some of the most depressing times of my life, I've wrote what I feel like are some of my greatest songs.
Huh. Well, you always hear that. Like, it's kind of I guess you could call it a myth, the artist starving and living up in a garret, painting away and, doing their best work when their life is the most horrible. In retrospect, I don't think that's necessary, to do your best work. I think you can still make great art and be really, really happy too at the same time. Although the happier I got, the less work I was doing.
Well, do you think that has to do with being in a... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, now being happy, I really have to push myself to do work. It doesn't automatically come naturally so much. I have to now probably keep myself more on a schedule than I ever have to get work done.
Do you, well, I have two questions I want to keep in mind. I guess related to keeping yourself on a timeline, how long does it usually take you to complete a piece?
Anywhere from, sometimes it can go really quickly. I can get a painting done in 2 weeks. Anywhere from
Wow.
2 weeks to a month, probably at the most.
Wow. And this is oil. You're working with oil.
Yeah, but it doesn't, a lot of people assume that oil takes a long time, but when you work really thinly the way that I do, and I use a dryer mixed into the paint, so by the time I finish and go back to it the next day, it's pretty much dry, so I can just pick up where I left off.
Okay. And then have you ever gone, we were talking just a moment ago about some pieces that you started and then were kind of like, those are too dark or didn't, you chose not to reveal them to the public. Have you ever gone back to any of those pieces and worked with them again, tried to delve into those spaces again?
I don't think so. For me, I've always been someone to only work on one painting at a time. If I and once I finish one, it's done and gone pretty much. I'll never go back and work on a painting again. So if I had started one and sort of put it aside or moved on from it, I don't have much interest in going back to it again. It feels like it's sort of a past life, and I'd rather keep working in the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then the other question that came up when you were talking about Dali being brave, but also his art, he was trying to shock people. What do you feel like your art is trying to do? What is your art trying to speak to people about?
I guess I've got a few objectives. One is just to make paintings that are not necessarily beautiful, but interesting to look at and fun to look at. That's probably the obvious first thing. The second thing is to hopefully create an image that the viewer can look at and enter into and find something relevant to their own story. I'm never interested in sort of creating a painting that tells my story and that's the only story and you have to get that. I really hope that everyone can resonate in their own way somehow with the paintings that I do. And that's one thing I try to do is just through the symbolism, leave it as wide open as possible so that it's easy for people to not feel obliged to figure out a puzzle or that sort of thing, or figure out what story I was trying to tell.
So you like the mirror aspect of it, which I also enjoy in your pieces as well, is looking at them and being like, wow, this resonates to me right now because of something I'm, an experience I've had or currently having. One of those that comes to mind is, and I know I keep referencing rather older ones, so I apologize, but I think it's called Release, and it's a woman that has like chopped away, like she's sort of like she's looking back. I think she's birch or sapling, some sort of
Right. Yeah.
She's definitely got your forestry influence there, but the way she's looked back and she's got a crown on and she's very much like, I'm done with that. That's the feeling that I strongly get from that piece, and I just love it because I'm like, wow, what an idea, what a concept that you could, be so rooted in something like an actual tree and then have the courage and power to cut away, something that wasn't serving you anymore, type of thing. I don't know if that's what you're trying to get out of it, but like you said, that's what I got out of it, and that's what I strongly felt as the viewer.
That was perfect. That was perfect. That was exactly what I was thinking with that one, was the whole idea of change, creating your own change, and it possibly being a painful thing to do, but being better off for it afterwards. Yes,
absolutely. I thought I read on your website that you are doing, are you doing something with Eckerd University still? Or Eckerd College, I think it is called.
No, but they would, I exhibited there a couple of times and spoke. They have a group of professionals who get together, and they had me go and speak to them a couple of times while I was living there in St. Pete.
Because I know that you've done some sort of, like, you did the what is it called, the dolly piece with the daddy long legs, or where you had talked about you copied every stroke, and you'd had sort of like a course on it, so to speak. I guess what I was going to ask you is that, do you have any interest in trying to, like, teach or have you?
I've been asked that a lot and have thought about it a lot, and the older I get, the more interesting that sort of appeals to me. I haven't done any teaching, but it might be in the future, coming up.
Yeah. Who knows, right? You have to follow your intuition on that. Right. I want to go back a little bit, though. Tell me about, and I'm sure you've probably been asked this. It's like someone at your level of success, though, you've probably been asked every question that I'm already asking. So I'm like, I try to throw that out of my mind. I'm like, okay, I'll just ask the questions that I want to. And if he's already been asked them, he'll answer in however he wants. But your experience right after Rhode Island School of Design, or was it during, where you went to Rome? That seemed to have really shaped and influenced.
There at the Rhode Island School of Design.
Okay. Yeah, that was pretty life-changing for you and your artwork.
Yeah. It really was, because I was, I mentioned that there was no other artists in my family, so I didn't know how naive I was to just all that there was out there in terms of art history, and I think that was my first time outside the country, so to be thrown into a year of living in the middle of Rome, surrounded by most of the greatest artworks that have ever been made, that was an incredible, life-changing experience for me. I wish I had known more before I went, because I could have made better use of my time, but still, it was a life-changing thing.
Yeah. Do you consider yourself, when I think of you as an artist, and I know that it's probably funny to hear, because you're like, well, I'm still, I'm only human, but I think of, your artwork is so timeless, not only because of like your choice to omit some of the more modern features, but even when you do include them, I guess, I don't know if it's that influence of like the time you spent in Rome and being around, some of the more Renaissance, I guess, Baroque period type pieces, but it seems like, are you trying to bring that energy into your pieces, or do you just, like you said, at this point, just do that naturally?
I'm definitely trying to do that. One of the other things that I didn't mention that I try to do whenever I create work is to make paintings that when you, in the first instant you see them, I hope that they remind the viewer of something they might have seen in a museum. So I really hope that, and I do intentionally use a lot of, well, just the style of my painting, the color. It definitely has a lot of references to, like you said, the artists from the Baroque period and the Renaissance. So I want them to sort of visually fit into that category. And then as viewers look at them a little more, then they realize, okay, this isn't an old painting. This isn't by some Renaissance artist. This is a contemporary painting, and it's maybe got a contemporary message that applies to life today, maybe, rather than looking at those Baroque paintings in a museum and not having a clue as to what was going on in them, because they were mythological or biblical or something like that. So I hope that my paintings look familiar, but new and fresh at the same time.
I think that they absolutely do. I would say that goal has definitely been reached. With that, do you feel like, now you mentioned it a little bit just now, but so do you feel like you're, like, social issues, some artists are like really driven by that, right? Like they try and actively work out those themes, not only within themselves, but in their work. But it doesn't seem like you're not doing that, but you're not active, like that's not like the agenda, right? I mean, you're not pushing for, for somebody to take some sort of political or socio-economic meaning from it.
You're absolutely right. I admire those artists who do create political art or art with that sort of message, but to be perfectly honest, that would bore me to death if I was, and it would kind of depress me too, because I get enough news without having to think about it and paint it all day too. And I'm kind of not ashamed to say that all of my work is very about me. I'm not creating art relating to events of the day or that sort of thing. It might indirectly come through what I'm doing because I'm reacting to the world around me and what's happening too. But at one point, I used to say that every painting I did was a self-portrait in one way or another. So I'm kind of a navel gazer in that sense.
That's very Jung-esque as well. But it's also like, how could it not be, right? Because you're painting it. But did you ever feel within the art world like, I mean, you've created your own realm and your own, made yourself relevant by, I guess I could ask you how you've made yourself relevant in that, but sometimes I've heard from artists before that when they don't do something that's like overtly, social justice type of images or something invoked with that they get some sort of backlash from the artistic community. Like, what are you doing? Did you ever face anything like that?
I didn't hear the last part of your question, but
I guess, did you face any backlash from not being
learned? No, I think I've been lucky in that sense. I've never felt a lot of pressure to do that, to create art having to do with social issues. And it took me a long time to realized this too, but at one point I stopped trying to appeal to everybody, or even a wide audience. My sort of collectors, you don't, I forget who said it, but the truth is you don't need to have a broad audience if you're to make a living, put it that way. You just need a handful of people out there who really believe in you and want to support you and buy your work. So I've never been one to try to have my work appeal to a big wide audience.
That's good. I mean, that takes a lot of courage, I feel like, especially when you reach that point where you're going to be like, well, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. It's not going to, but I'm not doing it for that. Right. It sounds like, first of all, like you said, you paint for you and to, express this, this inner dialogue that you're having and sort of show it, to the rest of the world. Do you feel like having the human features morphed with or evolving sort of into, birds or like the nautilus or just different elemental features? Do you feel like that is one of the most universal elements that people find in your work? Like, I know that how would you know what people find in your work? That seems like an odd question, but what do you think it is that speaks, what you're trying to say most with your work? Do you think it's those elements or something else?
Well, I think that might be more of the, I was going to say it might be one of the more fun elements that attracts people. But believe me, there's plenty of people out there who are just totally freaked out by that sort of thing and can't handle it. But that's part of my main message really is to that is something I really do want people to get or hope that they get from my paintings, is that idea of us being integrally connected to nature, so much so that we are literally part of it. We can be half tree, half human, half animal, half human, and to hopefully see that message comes across. So that's one of the main reasons why I do it.
That's one of the main reasons that I really enjoy your work, is that I feel like sometimes, or a lot of time as humans, we forget how connected we are and how dependent we still are on our environment. And we can easily, it's almost like as we got more like upright and our brains got like further away from the ground, like we forgot what it was like that we're still connected. It's like we have to get back to being grounded and, try and find, and you see it a lot, especially in the last couple of years. I've seen it in Rappahannock with, a heavy migration, I guess, coming from like Northern Virginia to Rappahannock, to people being like, I was locked basically, up for COVID, and I've got to get out to nature and reconnect. So I feel like your art is a strong reminder that, that connection is never gone. Like it's always there. You have these images sometimes of like, like a person in a cage, but like there's birds all around, and it's like, I guess just very, it's almost archetypal, I guess, some of your images to me, sure. Without being like during the Baroque period, like it's not overtly like religious or anything like that, but there's definitely a spiritual element to it, almost like, have you ever considered doing like astrological pieces, or have you done like astrological or like tarot pieces?
Yeah, I've thought about that, but even that is too structured, and it gets into a language that for anyone who's not familiar with the tarot, I would worry that they would feel sort of left out of the conversation. Everybody who is familiar with tarot would get it right away. But so that's one reason I have never really gone down that road, including mythology in general too, or a lot of the even traditional symbolism that's out there. It is, I guess, too formal for what I enjoy doing. I try to look for symbolism that I guess doesn't exist, and work with it that way. So I guess I'm making my own up as I go.
Do you have a realm that do you feel like like all your characters live in their own like planet or realm or different space then?
No, I don't have a land where they all sort of live and work. Even though every painting is definitely connected to all the others, and this is probably why I just enjoy working on one at a time too. I feel like every painting is its own sort of world and environment, and whatever character might be in there is particular to that environment.
So you don't work within like a Tolkien-esque or like C.S. Lewis, like a Narnia type. This is the universe that they live in, and these are the bounds of where they can go and can't go.
No, I don't have those rules, but I can say that Lord of the Rings had a huge influence on me as I was growing up. So that probably finds its way in somehow.
Yeah. I think without having like overtly like elven or fairy-esque creatures, they're still very I don't know, like you said, you're not really doing mythical, but they're, again, the fantasy element of it brings out that side, that curiosity in the brain, and definitely for me makes me want to continue to look into the painting and try and find, I don't know, I guess the sort of song in there, like each one of them is a story.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So what do you have any I know you're working on the Nautilus, the piece behind you right now. What do you have that you're looking forward to coming up on the horizon? Anything you want to share with our audience that they can,
Yep, I'm going to be having a small solo show in Australia at the end of the year in November. So, I said I only like to work on one painting at a time, but I am trying to get some smaller pieces done for that show. So that's something I'm definitely working on. And I just got invited by a museum in Florida to possibly do a show there next year. But that'll probably be just a mix of paintings I already have on hand and maybe try to get one or two new paintings done to have for that one too.
Do you feel a lot of, I know I've overused this word a lot in this interview, but do you feel like a pressure to have something new each time you do a show, or does it depend on the show?
It depends, but it's getting to the point where I'm lucky, just about every new painting I do finds a home somewhere. So it's really hard for me to come up with new stuff to include in exhibitions that I might be having.
Do you get and I know we're crunched for time here, so I'll start to wrap it up for us, but Australia is a very exciting landscape. Do you feel when you travel for these shows or, traveling for whatever reason that inspires your work and, these different stories will emerge, these different songs into your pieces?
I don't think the traveling, the places I visit necessarily inspire me so much. But one thing I do wherever I go is visit museums, so it might be more the art that I see than the landscape of the place. So I guess the answer.
That's fascinating.
Not so much. I live in my head so much that I hardly have to travel at all.
So it's not when you go places, it's not necessarily the people or the places that you gain inspiration from, but like the imagery, the colors, things like that, the shapes or different things. What about the land? Well, I said the landscape. I was going to say like the birds, or because they're so active in your work. Any of the animals inspire you?
Not so much. I feel funny saying that. I'm not terribly inspired by those things when I travel, but it's definitely refreshing, and I love to travel. I love being in a place where that's completely unfamiliar, and I love to actually feel lost when I travel. Like I don't know where I am, and I've got to figure everything out as I go. That's really satisfying.
That's a very artistic statement. And it sounds like it's what you've chosen to do with your life work as well, to figure it out as you go.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, I so appreciate you talking with me on Rappahannock Radio today. And again, a huge fan, and I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much, Stephen.
My pleasure. Thank you, Pat.